Welcome to A Mind for Life. We are out here today with the second video in the mini-series on brainwashing. I call it Brainwashing 101, the mini-series. And we're going to do this video. We're going to do another video after this. And who knows, there might be 2 or 3 videos left. I don't know. We'll see. Now, I'm going to get into this, the brainwashing thing as a part 2. But let me say this first. We're doing a little bit of shadow work, if you want to call it that. We're going into the shadow, and it's important. The shadow is not a bad thing. If you look in your world around you, there's shadow. There's shadow. Light doesn't bend around corners. Shadow is an integral part of life and the light. Would it be light without shadow? Now, the thing about the shadow is shadows often have treasure. The treasure exists in the shadow. Isn't that the premise of a lot of the work into past, going back into your past, psychological stuff, adult child stuff? Isn't that the thing to this? To go back into the shadow, to reveal? Now, you can't have enlightenment unless you have shadow. Light doesn't bend around corners. But to bring enlightenment requires the shadow. To go into the shadow and maybe see what has been exerting a negative influence over our lives. It's going into the shadow, you see? So the shadow is not a bad thing. But listen to this. You have to know who you are to go into this, because it's your tolerance level. In other words, I know for me, there's only so much shadow I can do, but it's important to do. In other words, too much shadow work, going into the shadow too much, and we should not dwell there. But going into the shadow too much can lead to depression. It can lead to anger. You can just be bitter. You can be vengeful. You're mad at the world. You're mad at your past. You're mad at what they did. And we're going to talk about they in a minute. You're mad at that. Okay? You're doing too much shadow work. You're depressed. You see the ugliness of your past, your life, the world, the people you're around. You're doing too much shadow work. Okay? So we have to do shadow work according to our individual tolerance levels. But enlightenment requires shadow. This life, this world, has shadow. Okay, let's go into the brainwashing. Now, just to recap the last video really quick, and I recommend you go watch that first. Brainwashing is, and here's the definition. Brainwashing is the covert, deliberate changing of another's perspective to fulfill a plan or agenda. It's the covert, deliberate changing of another's perspective to fulfill a plan or an agenda. According to a plan or an agenda. Now, we talked about it as a process mostly. In other words, your perspective generating mechanism, which we've been talking about forever, it gets into that. And it replaces your perspective. And emotions are the two-edged sword. In other words, emotions are often used to go from knowledge to belief. You're practicing thoughts, but you don't believe it yet till you get scared. Now you believe it. But it's a two-edged sword because, in other words, you can know what your perspectives really are, what you really know, and what you believe according to your emotions. So that can reveal the brainwashing to you. Oh, I didn't know. I thought this way. Wow, where did I get that from? Oh, I've been going to this group meeting over and over again. I didn't realize I started to believe that stuff. You see? So emotions are a two-edged sword in this. But what we want to talk about today, mostly, is that brainwashing is also a thing. And let me say this about the shadow, too. I need to say this. Just came to me. The artist in the shadow. Before we leave the shadow totally. The artist in the shadow. The artist uses the shadow to create the work of art, right? Shadow is very important to the artist. The artist understands how to use shadow to create the masterpiece. Your life is a work of art. The artist does not get emotional about the shadows. They use skill to help the shadows become part of that artwork. They don't get depressed painting shadows. They don't get into a negative place painting shadows. Their skill level has become such that they're not drawn into the shadow in a negative way. They understand that the shadow is a part of the beauty of the artwork as a whole. You see? So what would it be like if we were able to take the shadows in our lives and use them to create the beautiful life that we want to have? What would happen if that were to be the case? Think about that for a minute, because oftentimes we want to just avoid the shadow. We don't want to talk about it. We know this is happening, but according to tolerance level, of course, as I just mentioned, but let's deal with some of these shadows. Now, back to brainwashing. So think of it as a thing, and I say not thing, but thought form. And we've talked about thought forms a lot before, okay? Now, the thought forms are according to another agenda. It's covert. You're not deliberately choosing this. As I said in the past video, you're not walking around saying, okay, I want to become prosperous with money, so I'm going to start to read books. I'm going to start to talk to prosperous people. I'm going to try techniques. I'm going to watch videos. You're practicing thoughts that you will come into a belief with. And this is a perspective generating mechanism that eventually will become your perspective. Once it's your perspective, you can shape actually your life experience from that. That's deliberate. But when it comes to brainwashing, you're being given a perspective deliberately, covertly to fulfill another agenda. And think of it as a thing right now. As a thing, the brainwashing is a thought form. It has three aspects. One is doubt. It must make you doubt what your perspectives already are. It must make you doubt that. It must start to loosen your foundation there. That's the first thing that has to happen. If you are firm in your perspectives, which are your beliefs, right? And what you know, then you can't be brainwashed. So it must rock that foundation first. Okay? And it does that this way. One, mass agreement. In other words, everybody is doing this. What's your problem? You're the first person that I've had a problem with this. I can't believe it. Everybody's doing it. We've had millions do this, and you have a problem with it. So what's happening there is the mass agreement is being used to levy against you as leverage to rock your belief foundations, you see, because everybody's doing it. And what's your problem? The second thing with this is status. This person is a doctor. This person is a politician. This person is a teacher. This person has a bunch of money and they had a multi-million, billion-dollar company. So what do I know? See, the thing about doubt is this. It's being used to make you smaller. It has to make you smaller. You are the apex of your own I am presence. Let's just say that, kind of fancy words. But you are the apex of your universe. The kingdom of God is not out there. It's in the universe. It's within. To make you doubt pulls you out of the kingdom of God. And it puts you out here where you're seeking validation in one form or another. You've already been validated. Now, with the whole status thing, if they're rich, I should listen to them. If they're educated, I should listen to them. Even though this works for me, and this is my truth, maybe I should listen to them. That's status. And that's used to rock your foundation. The other thing is an appeal to a higher power. In other words, God said this. Are you kidding? You're going to go against the creator of the universe? So God said you should do this, and if you don't, then you're bad. If you don't do this because God said it, you're going to experience torment for an eternity. And not only that, the book that you're reading that says you should do this, even though it was written by the hand of a man, it's God inspired. You see, this is game. But this is creating that doubt. This is creating doubt. And let me clarify they before I go to the next aspect. We don't talk about they on a Mind for Life. There is no they. There is no them. There is no elite. You are the elite. There is no they that we talk about that's doing this to us. Drop that word from your vocabulary because it disempowers you. It makes you less than. And I said in this brainwashing, and brainwashing is a thing, the first thing is it has to make you doubt. And it makes you doubt by making you smaller. When you look at you say they're doing this, they're doing that. The elite, you're making yourself smaller. You're creating a nebulous, invisible something that has power over you. That's not the way it works. You've already been gifted with the ultimate power, which is the power of the Most High. Now, let me go to the second thing. Perspective. You must have a new perspective. It's going to give you a new point of view. A perspective is something you experience as a state of being. So there has to be a new point of view within this. It not just make you doubt. That's not enough. Now that you're doubting, let's insert this new perspective. And it's according to another agenda. We've talked about perspective over and over again. It is just the way you see things, but it's based on what you know and what you believe. So inherent in this brainwashing as a thing is perspective. So it's thoughts to practice. It's an emotional pivot point, as we talked about, that leads to a perspective. All that's happening. The last thing in this brainwashing as a thing, it must have defense. Defense. In other words, once it's a part of who you are now, it's got to be defended so that somebody else doesn't come and try to re-brainwash. In other words, have you tried to help someone and they said they wanted help, but they fought you? They argue for their limitations that they said they had, that they wanted to overcome, but they kept going back and doing the same thing over. That's defense. The perspectives they have within them a defense to keep them there, to resist change. It's a defense that's built into it. You're not going to go and say, oh, I see the defense. This is all happening covertly, and it's something you experience at the level of the conditioned body. That's from the cosmology of being, another video. But you don't have to even go totally into the cosmology to hear what I'm saying to you right now. This is a video about freedom. So let me recap this, because I want you all to understand this. I want you all to be able to see things clearer. Brainwashing, of course, is a process. They got their brain washed. That's a verb. We talked about that in the perspective generating mechanism. Brainwashing also is a thing, a thought form. And we talked about that today. As a thought form, it has three aspects to it. And actually think of it as a thing. One, it has doubt. Two, it has perspective. And three, it has defense. When it comes to the doubt part of brainwashing, the doubt part has three aspects. It has mass agreement. Everybody is doing this. It could be everybody in the nation. How did so many people go along with slavery in this country for hundreds of years? Mass agreement, brainwashing. It was in the open. How did that happen? See, when you go back and you look at history and you ask yourself, how did these things happen on a mass scale? You have to understand that people were brainwashed. And then certain people came through to open that up and to open the minds up. Okay, so the second thing under doubt that we have status. They have a high education. I should listen to them. Even though this has served me well, this perspective and belief has served my life, but they are the expert. So I listen to them. They have all the money. They have the education. They have the status. The other aspect to the doubt is appeal to a higher power. And that's a real powerful one. In other words, God said it. And if you don't do it, you're going to suffer. God knows everything, right? So if you don't do this, God is going to get you. And it's in the book. See the book? Now, yeah, a man wrote the book, but the man was inspired by God. And who's telling you all of this? A man. The last thing when it comes to the doubt is That's it when it comes to the doubt. Now, the second thing is perspective. It has to have a perspective in there. I hear something back here. There has to be a perspective within what's going on. So they have to give you this. They have to give you a perspective. And that's a bundle of being. We've talked about that before. It's just how you see things. But it's predicated on knowledge and belief. The last thing when it comes to seeing brainwashing as a thing is there has to be a defense. This perspective that's been given to you as brainwashing has to be defended. It has to be defended by the brainwashed. Has to be defended. So they will argue with you. They will fight you. They'll keep going back and doing the same things over and over, even though they said they want to change. They've been brainwashed, yes, because they want to change. They know, they're aware enough, but within that is a defense. So brainwashing is like a vironic, and I made up that word, process, okay? It's like a virus. It gets in. It's like malware. All right. So we're going to go into the next video after this, and maybe one or two more. OK, so rewind this video and go back over this. This is really important, guys, because it's really what's going to do is going to help you to become more aware. It's going to help you see things in life, to ask questions. You know, asking questions doesn't remove you from God. If God is so small that God can't handle your questions, that's not a God you should be serving. All right. Thanks for coming to A Mind for Life. Peace out.